Goedenavond, middag, good evening, good afternoon. Mijn naam is Petra Stienen. We gaan het eerste gedeelte van dit gesprek gaan we in het Nederlands doen. Daarna hebben we een gesprek met deze beide heren hier, Uğur Ümit Üngör en Jabir Bakker, in het Engels. En daarna zal Jabir iets in een mooi gedicht van Faraj Barekdar voorlezen in het Arabisch. Dus we hebben heel veel verschillende talen. Is het oké voor mensen als het straks in het Engels is? Dat ja? Goed. Dan, nou, mijn naam is dus Petra Stienen. En ik zeg altijd, als Limburg belt, dan kom ik. En als Syrië belt, dan kom ik ook. Dat zijn twee plekken die nogal in mijn hart zitten. Voor degenen die mij niet kennen, ik ben Midden-Oosten-expert. Ik heb heel lang als diplomaat in het Midden-Oosten gewerkt. En ik heb 5 jaar lang in Syrië op de Nederlandse ambassade gewerkt. Van 1999 tot 2004. En ik moet zeggen, toen ik het boek De Syrische goelag las, was ik weer terug achter mijn bureau. En in heel veel kantoortjes, cafeetjes, bussen, parken, bankjes in Damascus, in Qamishli, in Aleppo, waar ik gesprekken heb gevoerd met mensen, met Syriërs, die mij hebben geholpen om te begrijpen, wat gebeurt er in Syrië? Wat gebeurt er in gevangenissen? Wat gebeurt er in de geheime gevangenissen? En wat gebeurt er met de mensen die naar Nederland gaan? Welke verhalen kloppen, welke verhalen kloppen niet? Ik heb heel veel individuele ambtsberichten moeten verifiëren vanuit de immigratiedienst. En ik heb toen ook gemerkt wat het doet in families. Bij broers, bij zussen, bij neven, bij nichten. Als iemand uit je familie naar Nederland moet vluchten vanwege het Assad-regime. Toen nog Hafez al-Assad en inmiddels Bashar al-Assad. En een van mijn grootste nachtmerries is dat de zoon van Bashar al-Assad, die Hafez al-Assad heet, dat we straks er weer een krijgen. Maar daar gaat het vanmiddag niet over. Het gaat vanmiddag wel over wat is er in Syrië aan de hand als het gaat over het onderdrukken, het martelen, het pijnigen van een bevolking in een prachtig land met heel veel rijke cultuur. Daar gaan we vanmiddag misschien iets minder over hebben. Dus het wordt best een pittig gesprek over dingen die niet altijd heel fijn zijn. Het is, sorry Uğur, ik ga jouw boek wel aanraden, maar niet als nighttime reading. Het is het beste om te lezen op een zonnige plek. Voordat ik het woord ga geven aan Uğur om zijn boek in 10 minuten te presenteren, ben ik eigenlijk wel heel benieuwd, wie zit er in de zaal? Zijn er mensen die lang in Syrië hebben gewoond? Syriërs in de zaal? Wie zijn de Syriërs in de zaal? Ja? Marhaba. Marhaba. Ik ga niet aan de Syriërs in de zaal vragen met welke vragen zitten jullie, maar daar kom ik straks nog wel achter, want dat mag natuurlijk ook. Maar nou, mensen die lang in Syrië hebben gewoond, roep even. Dag Joost, ik kom even naar je toe.
Ik heb in Syrië gezeten als archeoloog bij de opgraving in het oosten van Syrië. Dus in een aantal jaren heb ik daar gezeten.
Ik ga nog eens even meer kijken van wie zijn nog meer de mensen. Ik zie Marjolein en Brigitte, die kennen Syrië natuurlijk ook heel goed. En ik ben heel benieuwd. Ik wil even van 2 of 3 mensen weten. En ik ga dan een beetje aan de zijkanten, omdat ik ook vanuit toch nog steeds de coronamaatregelen niet te veel langs mensen heen wil lopen. Zijn er mensen die zeggen, nou Petra, nu ik hier toch zit, ben ik eigenlijk wel, ja, ik heb hier echt een vraag waarmee ik hier naartoe ben gekomen. Aan het einde van deze middag hoop ik dat ik een antwoord krijg op de vraag. Ik zie iemand hier op de eerste rij al knikken. Maar mag ik u dan meteen vragen welke vraag u heeft? En ik hou de microfoon vast.
Mijn vraag zou zijn hoe het nu gaat met de vertegenwoordiging in Damascus ter zake van het schrijven van individuele ambtsberichten. Want in 1992, toen ik hiermee bezig was als advocaat, wist men ongelooflijk weinig van Syrië. En dat was schokkend.
Dus ik ga hem even wat groter vertalen, maar daar komen we straks nog op. Wat doen we nou eigenlijk met de informatie en wie gaat ermee aan de slag? Ik ga eens even kijken. Ik zie allerlei mensen wegkijken. Zijn jullie verlegen of hebben jullie nog geen vragen? Of durven jullie nog? Ik zie hier 2 dames op de eerste rij. Waarom zijn jullie hier?
We hebben de eer gehad om mee te mogen vertalen en redigeren van delen van het boek.
Okay. Oh, dat verdient wel een applaus. We gaan, ja, mag alvast een applaus. Noem ons even jullie namen.
Mijn naam is Sarah Hoefnagel en ik ben Roy Rensink.
Nou, mooi, dank jullie wel. Nou, nog eenmaal, andermaal iemand die... Ik ga toch even kijken. Ik zie al mijn mensen... Ja, mag ik jou even vragen? Waarom ben jij hier vandaag? En vertel even hoe je heet. Ik hou de microfoon vast.
Ik ben Melvin Ingleby, ik ben de Midden-Oosten-correspondent van de NRC... en heb veel onderzoek gedaan, ook naar marteling in Syrië... en daarbij ook veel samengewerkt met Uğur. Onlangs nog een lang verhaal over een man uit Arnhem... die hoogstwaarschijnlijk is doodgemarteld in de gevangenis van Assad.
Kijk, dit heb ik geleerd in Syrië. De nieuwsgierige blikken in de zaal zijn meestal journalisten in Nederland... en in Syrië zijn het meestal mensen die bij andere plekken werken. Maar leuk om je te ontmoeten, Melvin. Ja, volgens mij moeten we gewoon de man of the evening warm uitnodigen om de vloer te pakken. De vloer is voor jou, Uğur. Ja. En hij mag ook een aanmoedigingsapplaus. Ja.
Welkom en fijn dat zoveel mensen in grote getalen zijn afgekomen op presentatie van ons boek Syrische goelag. Het is een zonnige vrijdagmiddag en meestal zitten mensen dan op het terras hier buiten. Maar we zijn heel erg blij met de aandacht natuurlijk die het boek heeft gekregen. Ik ga heel kort de inhoud van het boek en een aantal van de belangrijkste punten en argumenten ga ik samenvatten. En daarna gaan we een gesprek voeren met Jaber. Ik wil heel even kort melden hoe we tot dit boek zijn gekomen. In 2018 heb ik Jaber ontmoet toen hij een presentatie deed van zijn boek over een van de gevangenissen, een van de ziekenhuizen die eigenlijk functie doen als gevangenissen in Syrië. En toen heb ik hem gevraagd van Jaber, hoe komt het nu eigenlijk dat er geen overzichtswerk is over gevangenissen in Syrië? En hij heeft gezegd, nou dat bestaat gewoon nog niet. En toen hebben we in onze discussies gewoon besloten om dat boek dan maar te gaan maken. Dus het is deels uit inspiratie, maar deels ook gewoon uit frustratie van het gebrek aan kennis gekomen. En we hopen dat het zeg maar, als eerste opzetje ook andere onderzoek in de toekomst gaat mogelijk maken. Oké, de Syrische goelag, de gevangenissen van Assad, 2020. In dit boek beargumenteren wij dat het Assad-regime, sinds dat het bestaat in 1970, staatsgreep van Hafiz Assad, dat het Assad-regime een gevangenissysteem heeft opgezet dat uit 4 verschillende dimensies bestaat. En die dimensies zijn de gevangenissen van de inlichtingendiensten, de militaire gevangenissen, de civiele gevangenissen en geheime gevangenissen. En we hebben geprobeerd te onderzoeken hoe dit systeem functioneert en wat voor impact het heeft op de Syrische samenleving. Dus dit is een beetje de inhoud van het boek. Voor degenen die het willen oppikken, dit is ook de inhoudsopgave van het boek. Dus het bestaat uit 2 delen. In het eerste deel kijken we naar de eerste dimensie zeg maar, van die gevangenissen, de inlichtingendiensten. Daar kom ik zo even op terug. Syrië heeft 4 verschillende inlichtingendiensten die alle 4 recht en macht hebben om mensen te arresteren en te martelen en gevangen te zetten zonder vorm van proces. En in het tweede deel gaan we in op de gevangenissen zelf. Er zijn 3 belangrijke militaire gevangenissen, Meze, Tadmor en Sednaya, vrij berucht. En dan tot slot hebben we ook civiele gevangenissen, dus de normale gevangenissen. En dan de geheime gevangenissen aan het eind. De omslag van het boek, het schilderij op de omslag is van mevrouw Fadia Afashe. Zij woont in Los Angeles, is de partner van de toch wel vrij bekende Syrische acteur Jihad Abdo. Ik was in Los Angeles in 2019 en Jihad nodigde me bij hem thuis uit. En toen ik het huis binnenkwam in de woonkamer had zij dit schilderij hangen. Dat schilderij is ongeveer net zo lang als ik en ook net zo breed als ik. Dus het is een heel groot schilderij dat enorm impact maakt. En ik heb haar gevraagd, mogen wij dat gebruiken voor de omslag van ons boek? En dat vond ze oké. Dus ik wil haar hierbij ook bedanken voor het prachtige, pakkende schilderij. De 3 vragen die wij stellen in het boek zijn de volgende. Namelijk, hoe is dit systeem opgebouwd? 2, hoe functioneert dit systeem van gevangenschap, marteling en repressie? Jullie zien hier meteen natuurlijk een aantal vormen van 3 van de vele vormen van folter en marteling. En tot slot, welke impact heeft het gevangenissysteem op de samenleving in bredere zin. Want dat is net zo belangrijk als het geweld zelf. Dus de impact die het heeft voorbij het directe geweld. Dat is minstens even belangrijk, denken wij, als het geweld zelf. Dat natuurlijk vreselijk is, maar de impact is veel groter. Alle discussies die over Syrië gaan moeten helaas beginnen met een discussie van het geweldsapparaat in Syrië. Dat heb ik hier even in 4 verschillende kleuren uiteengezet. Syrië heeft natuurlijk een leger en een politie. Nou, dat hebben heel veel landen. Daar is op zich niks bijzonders aan. Dat is gewoon het geweldsmonopolie van de staat. Nederland heeft ook een leger en politie. Maar wat wel bijzonder is in groen 4 verschillende inlichtingendiensten. Dus de militaire inlichtingendienst, luchtmacht inlichtingendienst, de staatsinlichtingendienst of algemene inlichtingendienst en dan tot slot de politieke inlichtingendienst. Nou, je kan de vraag stellen, waarom heeft een land 4 verschillende inlichtingendiensten? Daar kunnen we allerlei antwoorden op formuleren. Allereerst om het regime immuun te maken voor staatsgrepen. Tweede, dat dit soort diensten ook elkaar bespioneren en ervoor zorgen dat niemand te machtig wordt. En natuurlijk de capaciteit die het regime nodig heeft om de repressie van de samenleving te bewerkstelligen. Dan zijn we nog niet klaar. In blauw hebben we 3 verschillende speciale troepen. Dus een soort korps mariniers van elite troepen. Tot de tanden bewapend en met als taak om het regime te beschermen voor bedreigingen. Dus politieke bedreigingen. Een van die troepen is lange tijd formeel of informeel geleid door de broer van de huidige president Maher Assad. En dan tot slot hebben we in zwart de paramilitairen. Dat waren voornamelijk burgers die de wapens opnamen of die werden bewapend in 2011 om de opstand te onderdrukken. En die worden in het Syrisch dialect Shebbeha genoemd. Wat eigenlijk bijna niet te vertalen is. En die buitengewoon verantwoordelijk waren, heel erg verantwoordelijk waren voor repressie van demonstranten vooral. Goed, dan lopen we even heel snel door dat systeem. Dus eerst maar even de inlichtingendiensten. Nou, dit is een kaart van de afdelingen van de militaire inlichtingendienst in Syrië. Dus je ziet, de B betekent dan branch. Dat is een vertaling van het Arabische fra. In het Nederlands vertalen we dat met afdeling. Of filiaal zou je misschien zeggen, maar dat klinkt een beetje McDonald's-achtig. Dus we zeggen ja, branch in het Engels en afdeling in het Nederlands. En je ziet hier meteen eigenlijk hoeveel, wat voor een enorme vertakking heeft. Dus als een tentakels van het regime alleen al met de militaire inlichtingendienst voldoende zou zijn eigenlijk om dit land te surveilleren en om de repressie te organiseren. Maar dan zijn we er nog niet. Want we hebben bijvoorbeeld in Damascus 6 verschillende afdelingen van dezelfde inlichtingendienst. En dan moet je je dus voorstellen, nou, dat is een grimmig grijs gebouw, ergens midden in de stad, met een aantal verdiepingen bovengronds en een aantal verdiepingen ondergronds. Ondergronds heb je de cellen, daar zijn ook de martelcellen, en bovengronds heb je de administratie. En dan heb je dus 6 verschillende van alleen al in Damascus. Eén van die afdelingen, nummer 227, die is onlangs dus verspreid in het nieuws geweest vanwege een massamoord die ze hebben gepleegd in 2013. Dat is er nog maar eentje van. Dan heb je de luchtmachtinlichtingendienst. De luchtmacht heeft zijn eigen inlichtingendienst vanwege het feit dat Hafez Assad piloot was. En in de luchtmacht zijn eigen inlichtingendienst heeft opgericht om controle te kunnen houden op piloten en op de luchtmacht in het algemeen. Afgezien van het feit dat de luchtafweer heel belangrijk is in Syrië vanwege het feit dat Israël veel sterker is in de luchtmacht dan Syrië. Nou, die hebben dus ook exact dezelfde grimmig gebouw midden in de stad, hebben enorme macht om mensen te arresteren en te martelen. Dan hebben we de politieke inlichtingendienst, die specialiseert zich niet verrassend natuurlijk in politieke activiteiten. Dus dat kan van alles zijn. Het kan een poging zijn tot oprichting van een politieke partij. Dat kan het uiten van een politieke mening zijn, bijvoorbeeld in publiek. Dat kan het maken van een grap, bijvoorbeeld over de Baath-partij of over de president. Je kan het zo gek niet verzinnen, maar mensen zijn opgepakt om die redenen. Dat is dus de derde tak van de inlichtingendiensten. En tot slot hebben we de oudste, eigenlijk de staatsinlichtingendienst en Emne-Dawla of Emne-al-Am in het Arabisch, dus de algemene inlichtingendienst. En dat was eigenlijk de oudste inlichtingendienst. Die bestaat eigenlijk al sinds dat de Syrië als onafhankelijke staat bestaat. En die hebben ook een groot aantal afdelingen over het hele land. Bijvoorbeeld afdeling 251 in Damascus. ook wel afdeling Ghatib genoemd. Een van de directeurs van die afdeling, die is in Duitsland is hij onlangs berecht voor het martelen van iets van 4000 mensen. Maar er zijn er dus veel meer van dat soort mensen. Even een intermezzo voordat we doorgaan met die andere gevangenissen. En daarna kunnen we de discussie hebben. En dit is een snapshot, dit is een vignet. Een moment dat uit onze interviews komt. Dat eigenlijk in een capsule eigenlijk heel goed weergeeft, in een microcosmos, hoe het systeem functioneert. Een jongeman wordt in 2011 gearresteerd omdat hij op Facebook iets tegen het regime post. Midden in de nacht staan 2 mukhabarat-agenten. Mukhabarat is het Arabische woord voor inlichtingen. Voor zijn deur. Kom mee naar de afdeling voor een kop koffie. 5 minuutjes. 3 maanden lang wordt hij ondergronds gemarteld. Hij hangt aan het plafond en wordt met een zweep geslagen tot hij zich bevuilt. Hij krijgt schurft en krijgt een hernia in zijn rug. Na vrijlating keert hij terug naar huis, maar hij kan 's nachts niet meer slapen. Een paar maanden later wordt er weer geklopt aan zijn deur. 2 ongure mannen weer voor zijn deur. Kom mee met ons naar de afdeling. Maar meneer, u had mij al gearresteerd. Ik kom net uit de gevangenis. Nog niet door ons. Dat was de politieke veiligheid. Wij zijn van de luchtmacht inlichtingendienst. En weer wordt hij 3 maanden lang gemarteld. Dus dat toont een beetje in één biografie hoe dat systeem functioneert. Dus de militaire inlichtingen, de inlichtingendienst, dat is de eerste pilaar eigenlijk van de goelag. Tweede pilaar, dat zijn de centrale gevangenissen of de militaire gevangenissen. Daar zijn er 3 van, historisch gezien. Het begon met mensen, dan hebben we het naar Palmyra, Arabische naam Tetmur. En dan tot slot Seydnaya, waar een groot aantal mensen hebben gezeten. En nog steeds zitten. Dan hebben we de civiele gevangenissen. Dit zijn zeg maar de normale gevangenissen. Dus als je een niet-politieke misdaad pleegt, bijvoorbeeld je steelt of je moordt of een verkeersongeluk. Dus als je een verkeersongeluk doorrijdt of zo, weet je, dus niet politieke, dan kom je meestal aan de civiele gevangenissen, waar de condities meestal beter zijn, waar je fatsoenlijk te eten krijgt, waar je meestal niet gemarteld wordt. En dit is een soort van een stap voor vrijlating. Mensen die uit het andere systeem worden vrijgelaten, worden niet direct vrijgelaten, maar mogen eerst op kracht komen in het civiele systeem. En dat betekent dus als ze uit het systeem komen, dan zien ze er meestal niet zo heel erg gehavend uit vanwege het feit dat ze op kracht mochten komen. En dan hebben we tot slot natuurlijk de geheime gevangenissen. Dus sinds 2011 vooral, vanwege het gebrek aan capaciteit van de bestaande gevangenissen, heeft het regime de macht gegeven vooral aan milities en aan speciale troepen om ad hoc hun eigen gevangenissen op te richten. Dus dat betekende dus dat we met z'n drieën bijvoorbeeld een militie kunnen oprichten. Dat we demonstranten mogen oppakken. Dat we die mogen meenemen naar een boerderij ergens en ze daar mogen vastzetten. En dat we ze daar mogen martelen. En we hebben er 3 uitgelicht in het boek. Maar er zijn er veel meer. En die 3 zijn deze 3. Vooral Deir Smeel bijvoorbeeld is een buitengewoon gruwelijke informele gevangenis vanwege het feit dat er op geen enkele manier protocol wordt gevoerd. Dus het is lukraak geweld. Iedereen mag eigenlijk alles doen. Hoe komt dit allemaal? Nou, er zijn een aantal verklaringen voor, maar een van de belangrijkste verklaringen is eigenlijk het demobiliseren van de Syrische samenleving. Dus dat betekent gewoon dat er links zie je een doos met geoorloofde politiek in Syrië. Dus je hebt natuurlijk de Baath-partij en dan heb je een aantal andere partijen. Hier alleen met de afkorting. En dat zijn schijnpartijen. In het Syrisch noemen ze dat Assad-regime. Ja, ze bestaan wel, maar ze plegen niet echt oppositie. Als je daar lid van bent, dat mag. Dat vindt het regime niet erg. Maar op het moment dat je dus de stap neemt naar de ongeoorloofde politiek, verboden politiek, dus het communisme of liberale politiek of de moslimbroederschap of bijvoorbeeld de opstand van 2011, dan betekent dat je moet worden opgepakt en gemarteld totdat je dat niet meer doet. Dus dit is eigenlijk in een notendop de verklaring eigenlijk hiervoor. En omdat er zoveel mensen, ook sinds 2011, zich hebben begeven in die verboden doos van politiek, zijn op grote schaal mensen opgepakt. Goed. Dat was het voor nu.
Dankjewel.
Ja.
Wow, the meaning of a cup of coffee is so different in the Syrian context. Can I ask you, Jaber, how often were you invited for a cup of coffee?
Actually, I had this experience before because I drank a cup of coffee in Syria for 2 years in Sednaya, from 2002 until 2004. But the Syrian people try to handle the suffering that they passed in all the time. So we mention it in different language: cup of coffee, beit khaltak, your uncle, house, etc., etc., to make it the prison something we can speak about it in the street as a normal issue. Yeah.
And a finjan shai is not the same meaning, or
no.
A cup of tea. Everybody okay?
Yeah. Actually, the yeah, it's true.
Gaat het goed?
Yeah. That's okay. The cup of tea, it's not using in Syria because we have the Arabic coffee. That's the meaning for the cup of coffee, not the Turkish one. That is a very small one. You can drink it in 1 second, but in Syria you should drink it in maybe 10 years, 20 years. We speak about Raghid Tatari until now. He still exists and he's still in prison in Sweden from 42 years. I can't imagine there's anyone can handle it with this huge number of years inside the prison in Syria. But Raghid, he can. He do it actually, and he still.
And I don't think that he will be served many cups of coffee while he is in the prison. Huh?
Yeah.
Now, going back to the book, I already had the honor to be able to read the book the last couple of weeks. Can you tell us, maybe Uğur, you can start, can you tell us about the background? How did you actually write the book? Because it's so rich in information. Every single page there is information, I think, which has never been gathered before.
I mean, in an ideal situation, of course, we would travel to Syria and go into the state archives and interview people really openly. But I see people smiling and laughing already because that's a deeply naive presumption, of course, because this is a deeply authoritarian dictatorship that doesn't allow research, also doesn't allow research on less political topics, even for that matter. So that means that we have no access to the country. We can't go to one of these prisons and to research it. If you're interested in doing research in Holland, for example, you can take the train, go to Vught, and just do an interview with the prison director of Vught prison. It's not that hard. There you can't do that. So we had no access to the country. We have no official documents of the state, of the regime, which means we basically have to work with oral histories, with interviews of survivors. And the only advantage of having, let's say, that many Syrians who fled Syria is that also many survivors fled. So we were able to interview a large number of these survivors, apart from using materials that were leaked documents. For example, there are sometimes videos that Syrians videotaped from their balcony of people getting arrested. So these are really interesting moments. You can see how this process works. And also in a few cases we were able to interview some of the perpetrators, even like those people either had defected or even those who didn't and stayed inside through social media, for example.
I will go into the more detailed questions I have also about the perpetrators and also the impact. But before that, so how did you work together, Jaber, you and Uğur? How did you combine all your efforts in making this book?
Yeah, actually, I think Uğur tell you the story about the beginning of this book, and I go further with the interview with the survivors. We speak about 100, something like that. 100 interviews with these people and try to make it like a source of knowledge to study the prison. It's not easy to make like a long interview from this guy we start from the time very early before the prison and the experience inside the branches and the treatment in the branches, and after that the court and the prison, after the prison, etc., etc. until the time that we met him or her, because we speak about the different male and female. And after we make these interviews, this number from interviews, we try to write it before and try to make like a small analyze on it, and try to verification the information about the branches and about the prison with the perpetrators in some case, or with the human rights reports, etc. And this work in Arabic, it was in Arabic, and we have now our translator here with us, Lara, help us very well to make it in English, the main version from the Syrian Gulag in English, and after that, or go further in this version, I mean in the English version, and work on it deeply and try to make it like yours.
Maybe we can, use one example. For example, this young man you described. And so you interview somebody about memories from before the prison, from during the prison, from after the prison. But memories are dangerous, no? Or dangerous, it's when you have gone through very traumatic experiences, sometimes the memories disappear or they become blurred. So how did you deal with the likelihood that many of the memories are at least not exactly as it happened? It's how people remember, and maybe how they can be able to remember it as well, because maybe sometimes the memories are so painful. So how did you deal with this?
Well, basically how any historian deals with, for example, survivors of any other conflict or genocide. Namely, you try to triangulate, you try to corroborate. And
I don't know. I think I know what triangulate is, but maybe you can explain it, because I think the technical.
For example, take any branch from 227, for example, and if you interview one person that survived that branch, then you have one narrative. Maybe this person misremembers the face of the person who arrested him or who tortured him. So what you try to do is you try to find other people who also went through that experience, so you can corroborate to see where's the overlap and where do these narratives, these memories, clash. Mm-hmm. And when they clash, they're also interesting. So why does it clash? One thing that happens is, besides what you mentioned, is that somebody goes to prison, is tortured really bad. He meets somebody in that prison, that person's also tortured bad. Then the first person gets out. What they often do is they assume the story of the other survivor, and they claim that they've been the ones who experienced that. Yeah. Right? So this doesn't mean that the experience isn't real or hasn't happened, but in the detail, that he wasn't the person who experienced it. Right? So to give another example of this, tomorrow is the book presentation of Mustafa Khalifa. He's one of the survivors from the prison of Tadmur in the 1980s. I mean, his story is also a little bit like that. In his memoirs, he writes also openly that some of these things are experienced by somebody else. It doesn't mean they were not experienced, but maybe not by the persons themselves. And that's how you have to accept that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Maybe you want to add something?
Actually, we have one example about Tadmur. There's a story about the sergeant from Homs. The last name is Sibai. He passed away in Tadmur because he served in Tadmur as a military, and he treat the people inside. He treat the detainee in Tadmur with the normal way, not as a torture guy. And some of his colleague write a report to the officer, and he arrested him and tortured him in the open place. All the detainees in Tadmur can see, mm-hmm. And so that scene in Tadmur. But for example, Muhammad Birro, he one of a huge number from survival from Tadmur. He tell us the story about this guy. He died under the torture, but the other guy tell us the story. They hung him in the prison, after 1 month more that after 1 month in that time. So we try to make a different interview about one issue to make the right information, to get the right information, for example, about the place, about the food, about everything inside this prison, inside this branch.
I don't know how it is for the audience, but you sound to me like you're surgeons.
Yeah.
You're dissecting. Is that also a way to protect yourself from the impact it has on yourself?
Yes, I think so. I think so there are 100 interviews in the book, and then there's a number of memoirs, for example, that we've read, and especially with the interviews. With memoirs is a little different, but with interviews you have somebody of flesh and blood sitting across you, and who pours out his heart, of course. That's often very difficult because you have empathy with the person. Sometimes you suffer along with the person. So it's important to maintain some emotional distance. You need some emotional involvement, of course, to care, but you also need some emotional distance in order not to get caught up too much. So maybe not very clinical, but a little bit detachment. That's important, I think, because otherwise you can't write the book, basically.
When we spoke on Monday, I think, to prepare for this afternoon, we had a long... We went really into, and this is something that I didn't realize myself, how important these kind of oral histories are for healing. Maybe because you're such an expert also on trauma, and maybe you can say a little bit more about the healing aspect of... I mean, when you read this book, you don't immediately think about healing. There's so much violence and pain. So what is the healing aspect of this book?
Well, so there's often the story that if you interview someone who survived something bad, that you're re-traumatizing them because you're asking them to relive the story and to tell you the story again. And that's partly true. On the other hand, I mean, I don't know what Jaber thinks, he can answer for himself. Those people that I interviewed, I felt they had a sense of almost like redemption or liberation, because a book like this was never able to be written in Syria. And it's strange, only now, 50 years after the regime is in power, the book appears in Dutch, which is a little strange. So imagine that after 1945, the first book on the Second World War in Holland, appears in Arabic in 1995. I mean, that would be a little strange. So the censorship and the repression of the regime made this research impossible and made the narratives of these people impossible. So when I interviewed them, I felt actually, finally somebody is asking what we went through. And finally somebody is listening to what we went through. And finally somebody is writing down these experiences of what we went through. And I think that was in itself almost a liberating experience.
Maybe you want to add to this, to the healing aspect of writing down this history.
Yeah, actually, for the survival, they have the collective voice and try to tell us, not just me, tell us the story about the Syrian prison and the Syrian people inside the prison, because we speak about Syria as a big prison, not as a country all the time. And these people have this responsibility to tell the story. When they find any opportunity to tell the story, they get it immediately and give you the whole story and the whole emotional issue with this story direct for you, and you try to make it like something like a big issue, and try to prepare it and try to make it analyze it and prepare it to be a book. Tell the Dutch, not the Dutch people, just the whole world, the story about the Syrian people, because I think in this cell we have some Syrian people. These people, I'm sure they have experience with the prison, maybe by themselves directly, maybe indirect with their family or their friend, etc., etc. So it's a huge story. It's a big story. We speak about 23 million, the Syrian population. So we speak about a huge number in the world. So we try to present the Syrian prison story not to tell the story about the suffering, just we try to tell the story about the meaning of this suffering.
You already, when you gave the presentation, or you alluded to the very intricate system, and you had this picture of the two boxes. One is kind of allowed and the other one isn't. But why? This is something I also gathered from the book and also from some of the interviews I heard. These prisons are not like the prisons in the Netherlands, like a rehabilitation or a correction center. It's like a collective punishment, is it?
Absolutely. What is the point of a prison? In the United States, they call them correctional facilities. So you did something bad, you go there, and they correct your behavior. So when you get out, and one day you will get out, you won't behave like that anymore. Here, there's no real aim for correction, because somebody demonstrates, or somebody posts something on Facebook against the regime, or somebody is completely random, picked from a checkpoint, because he has the wrong name, or the wrong neighborhood, or the wrong background. And it is taken into this prison, is tortured. So when they torture people, do they really think that that person who was tortured will get out and then love the president and then be totally fine with the regime? It's counterintuitive. You might think if you torture someone so badly, he will get out and be more anti-regime. But interestingly, that's not how the regime operates. They see this as collective punishment. So it's retributive. It's retribution, revenge almost against people. If you dare to say anything against it, if you dare to stand up against the regime, you will be punished. We don't care how you feel about that punishment, but this is the violence that you will meet. And that is deeply authoritarian disciplining of society. This is one of the conclusions also in our book. They're trying to discipline people by beating them.
There's so many other questions I would like to ask. I have two more and then I come to the audience. There is this statistic in your book about 1 out of 123 Syrians is connected to some kind of mukhabarat. Is that, did I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Wow, 1 out of 123. So this means that wherever you go. So what does that do? I remember when I spoke to one of my friends when I was working in Damascus, he said, Petra, we have at least 7 identities as a Syrian. Because it depends on whom I'm talking to, whether I can trust you when I meet you for the first time, or whether you're of my inner circle. But we have to realize that there is always somebody in the room. So in this room, there would be 1 or 2, but you don't know who. So what does that do to the psyche of a society?
Actually, I don't know. Yeah, because in Syria, al-mukhabarat, we try to use this word because intelligence is something smart. Mukhabarat in Syria is something so stupid issue, and they try to revenge from the society, as Uğur said. And in this case, you should look behind yourself. In Syria, we have this story all the time. If you speak about anything, about the food, about the bread, you should look behind you.
The walls have ears.
Yeah, the walls have ears all the time. So you should be very careful, because you don't know from where the dangers came to you and arrested you and put you on the branch and torture you, maybe passed away under the torture. So you should take care about yourself. So from this way, we try to make a several identity to save ourselves from the dangers, because the dangers all the time change. Maybe in some case we speak about our brothers. They write a report for the mukhabarat, and the mukhabarat take you and put you in the prison. And under the torture, by the way, in Tadmor, they tortured them in Tadmor and ordered them to vote for Assad in 80s. It's madness. It's something. Yeah, it's something like a crazy situation. You should handle it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people. I think in 2011, when the revolution started, so many people had no idea about this very cruel regime and the courage of the people of actually standing up and protesting. Uğur, what does this mean? This book, the system. We have many Syrians now in the Netherlands. So how is your book relevant for us here in the Netherlands?
Well, there's maybe two elements are important. One is that so Syrian, a survivor of one of the prisons, he runs away from Syria. He goes through to Turkey, and then he swims across to Greece. Then he goes all the way across the Balkans and Europe, and arrives here with nothing. And then what he gets then here from the immigration authorities and from the gemeente is, welcome to Holland. Here's your apartment. Here are your books to learn Dutch. Welcome to Holland. See you. Bye bye. Right. So, and for somebody like that, and then for example, they're upset that the person can't learn the list of words in Dutch that well. Well, I'm not very surprised at that, of course. So the attention that we need to give to trauma, to individual and collective trauma, I think is much higher than it is right now. Of course, for this country, but also for Germany. If there are about 800 to 900,000 Syrians in Germany, that would make almost 1 out of 10 Germans Syrian. Right? That's a huge number of people, and that's an exceptionally high number of people who went through these prisons. So trauma is one thing, and the second thing is ideas that's been floated across Europe, not only by the Danish government but also elsewhere, that, for example, Syria is safe because there's no more fighting, so you can send people back. The idea that, for example, Damascus is safe because there's no more fighting. But the problem is that, of course, fighting is not the it's not the major. Is one of the reasons people, of course, fled. But the fact that there's no more fighting means the Mukhabarat is fully in charge again, and that's not a place you can send people back. So it's relevant for trauma and for asylum for us. The way that we look at asylum and return. Return is definitely not an option, I think, for most people. I mean, forget about the economic conditions. And second, there needs to be more attention for trauma, I think.
You want to add something to this?
No, actually.
It's interesting what just happened, huh? This knock on the window. It's not an innocent knock when you're among people who have... And so you see the guys, they're not shabiha, Dutch shabiha, but almost. Shabiha, I think, are like kwelgeesten. Yeah, like poltergeist, pest, harassment. Before we go to the audience for some questions and answers, I would like to invite Jaber to read a poem. So if you can sit, just wait for the...
The poem is on page 163 of the book.
Yeah. I will speak in Arabic. مساء الخير جميعا. هاي الحكاية اللي رح أحكي عنها هي حكاية قصيدة كتبها فرج برقدار بفرع فلسطين نيسان 1987.
This is a story he is telling about the Palestinian branch in
1987.
87.
Yeah. بلشنا الحكاية نحن بيقول يروي السجن حكاية قصيدة كتبت نقرا على جدار زنزانة منفردة في فرع فلسطين نيسان أبريل عام 1987. نقلها الشاعر السوري فرج برقدار إلى زميله أكرم البني في الزنزانة المجاورة مستعينا بلغة المورس التي طورها السجناء لتتناسب احتياجاتهم. لغة كاملة لها أصولها وطرائقها المعقدة والصعبة، إلا أن البني وبرقدار برعا في استخدامها. نقر برقدار على جدار الزنزانة الفاصل بينه وبين زميله البني 11 نقرة متصلة قاصدا حرف الكاف باللغة العربية، ثم تابع نقره قائلا: كان يا مكان. حدثني زمن بن زمان أن النار دليل، فتزود ما يكفي منها لطريق وعر وطويل. حاول مهما الليل، فإذا دق اليأس عليك الباب لا بأس، انهض واكتب فوق الجدران، واكتب فوق الجدران من غير شروح أو تفصيل: السيد يأس. أبلغ مولاك السلطان أن الزنزانة ليست أضيق من قبره، أن الزنزانة ليست أقصر من عمره هذا إن قبلت أرض جيفته محفوفا بالأقدام ومحروسا بالنسيان. للمصادفة أنه هو اليوم الذكرى 22 لوفاة حافظ الأسد اللي بيتذكر مثل هذا اليوم بال2000. Yeah. Actually, this is it's not something we prepared. Today is from 20 years ago, Hafiz al-Assad passed away and died on this day, on 10th of June.
2000.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for the poem. I remember we were actually, the applause is... It's a weird story about dates. I remember this date, on 2000, we were traveling with my sister and my daughter Soraya to Jordan to visit Petra. And then we heard about the news of the passing of Hafiz al-Assad. So we were in front of the television. And my sister, who is from Roermond and is not very politically active, is like, well, why is this? Why are you like, this has been what people have been waiting for, been fearing. And there was another date in the book. I was telling the publisher, Stefan, 29th of February 2000. You describe how one of the people you interviewed was called and was put into prison in Aleppo. And this was my first wedding anniversary, and I was celebrating it in one of the restaurants in Aleppo. So when I was reading this, I thought, this is so weird, how the contradictions, at the same time. Tatmur, the prison in Tatmur is next to one of the most beautiful monuments in the world. Yeah, Palmyra. We have knowledgeable people on the front row. I'm going to invite you for the Q&A, for questions and answers. I would like you to state your name, if you want to, and keep it brief. And I know that you have a lot of questions. I see a lot of enthusiasm, but I will go. You were first, and then I'll come to you later on. So we'll give the floor to somebody else, please. If you mind to stand up so everybody can see you, and I will keep the mic.
This way?
Yeah, what you want, whatever you want.
Okay. Now my question in English or in Dutch?
I think in English.
Or in Arabic.
Maybe in English is better. Let's keep it on English.
In English, okay. My name is, okay, to you. Yeah, I've heard that the sources that you've been using when you wrote the book, interviews mainly, but my question is that on social media, I've seen many awful pictures of prisoners, and they were tortured, and they were very skinny. When I saw them, I thought this is the Holocaust of Hitler. So my main question is, how is it possible that the revolution, it began in 2010, now 11, let's say, 11, 12, and that they are so skinny in no time, in 2 years or 3 years, because these pictures, they were leaked from the I don't know how, and they were just like also girls, so and with numbers on them.
Thank you.
So I don't understand.
Okay, about the pictures, both of you, who wants to answer?
You can start if you want.
Because of Facebook, which became open in Syria early 2011, ironically, a lot of people started posting things online, stories, memories, photos. All those materials were very helpful. We used that as well. We also used, mostly for the historical bits, the archive of the lawyer Peter Bogaerts, who's sitting right here, who's done hundreds of asylum cases, including many people from Syria. And those asylum dossiers were also very, very useful, because he interviews people when they first come in, and those interviews were terrific, fantastic materials. I think you might be mentioning the Caesar photos.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Caesar photos are, for those of you who don't know, you can Google them, but they're pretty bad. They're very graphic. A set of leaked photos, maybe more than 20,000, 22,000 photos, maybe that were leaked by a military photographer, somebody who had to take pictures of people who died under torture. So he took those photos and he ran off with them. And they're all online. You can see them for families to identify their loved ones. How is it that people become so skinny so quickly? You would be surprised how easy it is to emaciate, to degrade the human body. It is relatively easy to do that, actually. For example, me and Jaber, we like to eat, we like to hang out. But obviously, someone like me who would be with 3 weeks in prison, and I would have lost 40 kilos. My muscle mass would degrade very massively because of the torture. So I would get all types of diseases, and this is relatively easily done. And the longer this takes place, of course, the more people start looking like skeletons. And that's what you get. People who leave the prisons, in the end, they look like skeletons. And they can't recognize themselves. We have a number of photos in the book that are before and after photos. And before you see a healthy young man, for example, cheeky, and after that you see basically a gray skeleton. And this is what it does to people. It degrades people very quickly.
It's the dehumanizing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'll collect some more questions. I'm going, please, can you, if you can stand up, and we'll keep the mic. I'm not going to give the mic away. I'm going to do it like
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'm Arthur Wassenberg, political economist and retired from the university. First of all, I want to express my deep admiration for the resilience that you demonstrate as Syrians and your willingness to share your experiences with people outside of Syria. I have two questions, more or less related. Would people in Syria be surprised if they learn about what is happening around yesterday, today, and tomorrow? What is described, the kind of documentation that you collected in this volume? By the way, is it already translated in English and French? The book?
It will be in English, but we don't know exactly when.
Talking about the reception of your book,
yeah,
I'm interested in a broader framework than Dutch people.
That was the second question.
The second question is, do you have knowledge or documentation about the rivalry between the different intelligence agencies? Is there a sort of hierarchy in the sense of a supreme command that orchestrates and coordinates and balances the different loyalties of the people working for the military, the civilian, the political intelligence? And how far can Assad make use, if there's rivalry, if the different agencies are competing for prisoners?
Thank you. I'm gonna be strict. I think it's clear. Thank you very much, Arthur.
Okay.
Long, good questions, which would have another 2 books to be written about, huh?
Yeah, actually, for the Syrian people, this is the normal issue that they can hear about it in the street, in the house, from their friends all the time. We spoke and still speak about Tadmor until now as something like symbolic issue, not a good symbolic. We speak about some piece of hell, Tadmor, but we still speak about it. So the Syrian people never surprised from this kind of documentation or this book. And the second one about the hierarchy of the mukhabarat or the intelligence. Actually, it's so complicated to understand how the Syrian mukhabarat function and working. For example, we speak about the Air Force intelligence. It's the main one. It's so close from the president Bashar al-Assad and Hafez al-Assad before him, and this is the Air Force intelligence still exists from very long time and still have a huge powering in Syria. I mean, in the street, on the ground. But in some case, you can mention that the military intelligence go over it. In the other case, you can mention that the general intelligence go over over the two that I mentioned before. So it's complicated. It's something like for the it's something going to with the people. I mean the general, for example, Ali Mamlouk, when he president of the general mukhabarat, the general intelligence. This intelligence go to be a main one. But in the different case, for example, if we speak about Ali Duba, I'm sorry for the name, it's different for you. Ali Duba, so famous military intelligence officer, he was a horrible guy and he was so close from Hafez al-Assad. So in that time, the military intelligence so powerful in Syria and have everything inside it.
I have a few more questions here, so I'm going to invite you. Please, what's your name?
My name is Ufuk Akça. I'm a student at the UvA. And I have a question. It's maybe a technical question, but would the violence in the prisons differ if you were from a specific political group? Would the violence in the prisons differ if you were from the Muslim Brotherhood, if you were from the 2011 revolution? Communists, how would that differ, and how can that tell us something about the Assad regime?
Thank you.
Oh, that's a very good question. Huh? So, how does the levels of violence differ between groups? And in general, let's say since 2011, from what we know, there are some differences in the treatment of people depending on their background sometimes. But also, for example, the most famous massacre in the prison of Palmyra, so Tadmor prison, was directed against the Muslim Brotherhood. That's because Hafez Assad's personal and also institutional hatred of the Muslim Brotherhood in particular was such that in Tadmor you had a large group of communists. There was, I mean, this is often forgotten, but the Middle East actually had one of the largest communist movements in the world. And if you look at party membership, before, of course, the Soviet Union took over, the membership levels were higher than in Eastern Europe. Right? The Iraqi Communist Party, for example, or the Syrian Communist Party. So one group of communists. In the other room, in the hall, are the large group of Muslim Brotherhood people. When there was an assault, an attempt at assassination of Hafez Assad, most likely by the Muslim Brotherhood, literally the next day there was a huge massacre against the Muslim Brotherhood prisoners in the Tadmor prison. So you do see some differences there, but in terms of when they grab you from your house or from your street or wherever, when they take you first to the Farah, I think the reception, so the hafle and also the torture is probably the same.
The same, yeah.
You are using words which I know, but the hafle, which means party, has a different meaning as well, huh?
Yeah. So the reception, when they take you in, upon arrival at the branch, to put it simple, they beat the shit out of you. This is called a reception party, hafle in Arabic. So that is the same for everybody. You can scream as much as you want. I'm not Muslim Brotherhood. You can try to yell as much to try to get out of the beating. No, you're going to get that beating. And also later in the actual torture sessions, I don't think there are major differences between them. There have been some Syrians who floated the idea, well, if you're from a conservative Muslim background, they would torture you more. But what we've found out actually that across the board, it doesn't really matter.
Even if you can prove that you're from the Alawites.
There is the sect, the religious group, ethno-religious group that the Assad family comes from are Alawites. We have a paradoxical conclusion here. On the one hand, there are some people who treat it better because they were, and on the other hand, there are people who treat it worse because they exactly were supposed to be loyal.
I have another question here, Melvin, if you may.
I'll just. No, I introduced myself already. Melvin Ingleby, I'm the Middle East correspondent of NRC. Hi, Jaber.
Hi.
Nice to see you in person finally. I have a question for you, Jaber. We spoke about this at length before. It's a question about intel gathering by the Syrian regime in the Netherlands. If we read the novel or the memoirs of Mustafa Khalifa, who's coming to present his book or the translation of his book tomorrow as well in Amsterdam, we find out that he spent 13 years in jail because of a joke he made at a student party in Paris. and someone reported him. How likely do you think this type of intel gathering is going on in the Netherlands right now within the Syrian refugee community? And more importantly, what do you think the Dutch authorities can do to stop it?
It's a difficult question, actually. Because, you know, in Syria, you can pass away if you say any joke about the president, for example. And if you say anything wrong in the regime eyes, you will pass away. But if we speak about the Dutch authorities, what they can do to help the Syrian people in this journey, I mean, just a journey, because we try to make it as a justice, not a revenge from the Syrian regime. We don't think about the revenge from the Syrian people that work with the Syrian regime. Just we try to recognize the system about the Syrian prison and try to analyze it, to make it down, to stop it, if we can. And in this case, the whole world, not just the Dutch authorities, can help us to support the Syrian researcher and the different people work in Syria to continue this journey. I think it's a very long journey. The Syrian gulag is just the door that we can open it to understand how the Syrian prison work and still exist until now. We speak about 15 years. 50 years, this gulag still exists and still work day by day and torture the people and kill the people inside the prison. So if we try to think how, I think just one thing, just keep the Bashar al-Assad or the Syrian regime out of the power. So in this case, we can find the solution.
Would you like to react to it as well? I'm coming to you.
I mean, all diaspora communities have people who spy for the original regime. So that's also for the, I don't know, the Iranian community or the Turkish community or whatever. There's nothing special there. But it does become, I think, very problematic when, for example, when a former detainee, this is an actual story, former detainee, survivor of one of the prisons, flees to Holland, gets asylum here, and then is neglected by the authorities. Then he's lured back into Syria. He goes back, taken back, or one way or the other, he's blackmailed back, for example, back into Syria, and then he disappears. Yeah. Right. So this should be a safe haven for people, I think. And if you feel that even in these streets you have to worry about the mukhabarat, then there's something wrong. And then, of course, there's issues of counterintelligence and whatnot that need to be done. That have no illusions about this regime.
It's weird, huh? Because your question really makes me realize how much I already have this fear inside of me, even though I left 12 years. I mean, the last time I was in Syria was 12 years ago. I remember walking with my little daughter in the streets of Damascus, and she was like, "Mom, who is this guy?" And I'm like, "Maybe not." Yeah. It really goes under your skin. And here I feel like, there are a lot of things I would want to say to you about this, but I don't know who is in this room. This is how it works. It's weird, huh? Yeah. I mean, I am protected. There is no way I can be in danger, and still. I'm going to connect questions here, and then I come to the first row. We do 5 more minutes, and then we're going to round up. Please.
Yeah, my name is Jurgen Maas. I'm a publisher. I have a question for Petra. How would you qualify your work as a diplomat more than 12 years ago in Syria dealing with this issue?
Well, yeah, I worked from 1999 to 2004. I can remember the frustration I felt for the lack of interest of the horrors of the regime against so many people. And I think I have, like the gentleman in the first row, I think I've read about 500 of these files. And I know that some of the stories were true, but not connected to the person asking for asylum, as you were saying. I think we were fooled by Bashar al-Assad and his beautiful wife. I mean, how often I got the question, oh my God, why? How can this happen? Because he studied in England and she grew up in England. I'm like, well, I can talk about a few other dictators who grew up in Europe. So yeah, frustration for our lack of interest, and even not believing in 2011 when the revolution started that this was a genuine revolution. And it's a short answer which needs more time, because this is not my event, this is the event of the two gentlemen in front. So, question for the gentleman in front. Do you mind to stand up?
So my name is Shahin Nasirian, and I'm a lecturer in political theory working at the UFA. Thank you both for writing this important book. I had one question about, two interrelated questions. What was actually the impact of the 2011 uprising on this totalitarian intelligence system that you are describing? Because the Assad regime was severely challenged by the opposition, and they don't have total control over the Syrian territory at the time. And my second question is somehow interrelated to it, because I was actually wondering to what extent the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is instrumental in maintaining this totalitarian intelligence system.
Can I throw the Russians into this question as well?
Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
Why not? So the 2011 mass demonstrations and that poured so many people into the streets, they put the system, the gulag, in overdrive. So it had to all of a sudden absorb tens of thousands of people that needed to be processed in the prison system. The arrest, torture, I mean, at least the ringleaders, some of the organizers of demonstrations or the organizers of opposition. So you saw very quickly in 2011 that the prison cells were overflowing. They were filled and then overfilled, which caused, of course, a lot of people to die because of exposure, or lack of sunlight, lack of food, lack of medicine, negligence, which also was intended, was deliberate, of course. So that's one important element of it. And then the second way in which the 2011, the uprising affected the system is that just when people were being fooled that Bashar al-Assad was going to be a liberal, intellectual doctor and whatnot, a computer guy, that's exactly when the mukhabarat became all of a sudden much more important than they already were, right? Because who can repress this uprising? The mukhabarat. It's not the Ministry of Culture or the Ministry of Information or the Bureau of Water Management. No, you call the military intelligence and you let them handle it. So their relative position inside the regime became even stronger than it was, especially with the Air Force intelligence, actually. Maybe they've never been so powerful as they were since 2011. Then the Iranians, of course, the Iranian regime really loves militias because it is itself a paramilitary regime. So its support of the Shabiha militias especially, but also of some of the other, some of the special forces and troops, caused, of course, those prisons also to expand, right? And without that support, that backing, especially of the militias, the militia prisons, the secret prisons, wouldn't be as widespread as they were.
Yeah.
I have two more questions on the front row, and then we have to conclude because we said that we would end around 6:15.
Jaber also has a question to Lara, actually, to the translator.
Ah, okay. We do that first, and then the two gentlemen, and then we're going to present the real first copy. You know how this works with books, huh? People read it, and then there is the real first copy at the book launch. And actually, there are books for sale. This is the commercial break. And everybody who has written a book wants the book to be bought. So I hope that we motivated you already enough to go and buy the book. And I'm sure that the authors wouldn't mind to put a signature there in. Huh?
I mean, I don't mind if you buy it or not, but at least read it.
Yeah,
you can also steal it. Or
so a question for Lara, and then this gentleman, and then I ask you the last question. You can ask the last question.
Yeah, actually, my question for Lara, she's our friend. She translated the whole interviews, the whole book from Arabic, not the whole. I think 60% from this book from Arabic to English. And my question: how you work in this difficult stories, difficult situation, difficult informations that you should translate it from Arabic to English with the full right?
She's sitting in the back. Do you mind? I hope you will give an answer.
Sure. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege for sure. And it is a moment that we all have been waiting for. And I hope it's just the door, as you said, to much more. We deserve it. We've been waiting so long. It wasn't easy at all. I have had dreams about the things. I could visualize. It's not literature. It's not a literary book. It's not a novel, but it's based on interviews of real people, and it's detailed and it's graphic. And at some points, I still see them. I could visualize them while I was translating, and I could see them in my dreams. I see them when I look at my girls, and I thank God I am not there, I guess. It's a teeny mini trauma, actually, translating it. And I'm sure doing it is even much bigger.
Well, I hope that by your translation, by all the work, the door of the beginning of the healing is being opened as well. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah. I have two more gentlemen who were waiting for quite a long time. Peter, what's your question?
Finally.
Can you explain the relationship between the former Soviet Union and nowadays Russia in relation to the system of the prisons and of the repression in Syria, and how does it come that Russia is still supporting Bashar al-Assad? It is not protesting against the neglect of fundamental human rights in Syria. How does it come?
Thank you. Another book.
Yes, no, that's a very important question, of course. I mean, a relatively small country like Syria, of course, needs patrons. It needs a great power that stands behind it and that supports it at the international level. So if there were no Russian vetoes in the United Nations Security Council, most likely Assad would have been out of the picture, most likely. The military and material and political support, diplomatic support is absolutely key, very important. And without that Russian support, none of this would have even have survived until now. Now, why does Russia support knowing that these things happen? Because, trust me, they know. But that's not important to them. Because the ordinary Syrians' lives or human rights violations of people in Damascus, Aleppo, or whatever, is not relevant to them. What's relevant to them is the battle against the United States. So if the US is for against something, they're against it just to be against it. If the US is against something, then they're for it just to be contrarian. So that really explains, I think, apart from other strategic and historical ties between the Soviet Union and modern Russia and the Syrian intelligence, because there are strong ties between the KGB and the Syrian Mukhabarat. It's not true that the Mukhabarat was established or trained by the KGB per se, but there were very strong relationships. And that's also one of the reasons we call the book Syrian Gulag. And we have a friend who criticized us for using the word Gulag, and rightly so. But the reason why we use that, and we explain that in the introduction, is because of the impact that this has on the Syrian society at the scale of the 23 million small, nice country in the Eastern Mediterranean. The impact is so above what it should be. It has such a disproportionate impact on that society. Every day people think about prison. If either they've been in prison or they're thinking about, I don't want to do things that will land me in prison. Yeah. Or they will think about, my cousin was in prison, my brother was in prison, maybe my neighbor was in prison. So this has a disproportionate impact, and that's the reason why we called it Gulag.
Yeah, and then the influence of the Stasi. I went to the Stasi museum in Berlin, and it smells exactly the same as in some of the offices in Damascus. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. The last question for the gentleman here.
My name is Victor Kal. I'm a philosopher at the UvA until 1 month, and then I disappear. I have two questions. First question is the torture. It seems it's the general culture in the prisons. Now my question is, how did this culture develop? Is this Was this stimulated just by one man, the president, or is it a more general culture? And so that's one question. How did it develop? And the second question is about the eye of the world. It has two sides. The eye of the world, seeing what they are doing, is this eye not felt? So you can do what you do in these prisons and you have the illusion, perhaps, now seeing the book, that you are not seen. And also, another question, perhaps more important, the eye of the world. Can you make a reproach to the eye of the world that they do not look so well, so that they go unseen? So that we are not present enough with our eye.
Thank you very much. And almost poetic questions about a very tough topic.
Yeah. Actually, for the first question about the torture as a culture for the Syrian intelligence service in general and the Syrian prison, I think it's developed from the Levant army, the French Levant army in that time, because this Levant army made the douzième bureau for the intelligence issue, and this bureau that go to the Syrian army, the National Syrian Army after that, and this bureau president or directed from the different general or officers, Syrian officers. All these people try to make it a headquarters of the Syrian regime or the Syrian government. If you try to control the society, you should use the power. And the power in Syria at that time, the torture. And the torture started with Abdelhamid Sarraj in that time. It's I think, the older famous officer, intelligence officer in Syria, Abdelhamid Sarraj, and very fast increase and develop with the Al-Ba'ath party and with the Al-Assad family to be not that just the culture for, I mean the torture as a culture, to be something like obligation to do it inside the prison. It's not, all the time the guard tell the prisoner, you are not here to feed and sleep, you are here to torture. So it's something like a mental issue. And I have a question for myself, how we can change this mental in the future. Actually, I don't know. Yeah.
And the eye of the world.
Yeah.
Not seeing or maybe not wanting to see what can be seen.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable truth, this. I understand people want to be outside drinking a wine and instead of worrying about this, that's understandable. But the problem is, who wants to live in a world where there's torture? Right? After what I've read here of all the researchers, I think this is heinous, one of the worst crimes you can actually commit. And I think the eye of the world should be exactly there. There's a famous survivor of the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, and Elie Wiesel once said, if there's ever in the world a place where they torture people en masse, where they massacre people en masse, that place should become the center of the world at that moment. And I think for me, that's sometimes we joke about this. Sednaya right now is the center of the world, because later we will have dinner. Tomorrow you will wake up, you will have breakfast, and people will be tortured. And the day after too, people will wake up, they will be tortured. And the day after, and the day after, and then next week, and the next month as well. So that's something that I just want as a message to give to people, that this is an ongoing process.
Yeah. And in 2004, when I left Syria, people weren't really aware about Syria. And then 2011 happened, and then Syrians came to Germany and to the Netherlands. So, as they say in Dutch, dit is niet de ver van onze bed show. It's very close by, and I would really like to thank both of you and Lara and all the people who have worked on this important book. Please spread the word. I said it is not easy bedtime reading, but it is must-read reading. I think the Syrians deserve us to be their storyteller, and to also, the empty chair should be at our table almost, and think about the Syrians who had to endure this, who are still enduring this. I had many more questions, but one last question is about the article that was published about your research on the Tadamun and about the perpetrators, because somehow we discuss a lot about the victims of torture, but isn't the answer of it also dealing with the perpetrators?
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that we also try to do in this book, is a lot of human rights documentation, journalism, and other research investigations, they're often phrased in a passive voice. So the victims were massacred. The person was tortured. The person was humiliated. But who did the massacring and the torturing and the humiliating? Who are the perpetrators? Why do they do this? How do they work together? So we also try to give quite a lot of attention to the perpetrators in this book. We also feel that in order to understand this system and the prison, just taking the stories of the survivors is not enough. We need to also focus very much on the perpetrators, because strangely, the perpetrators are also human beings, and they're being made to do this by people, or they do this for various reasons and motives, and that's just as important, I think.
Yeah, and I think we can learn from what happened in Germany with Anwar al-Bunni's work to stop this impunity. So, well, we can work on that here in the Netherlands as well. So now, how are we going to do a real hafla? Not the reception. We're not having a reception, but we have a kind of an important moment, festive moment. Well, it's a rewarding moment, I would say, where Uğur will hand the first copy. And is there a real first copy? So can I ask Marjolein Wijnings to come to the front? Well, please, Marjolein, you can take the stage. Maybe that's the best way to do it. And for those of you who don't know Marjolein Wijnings, she is a very active person on Syria and on the Middle East and human rights. She works for Pax, for Peace. And I remember the first time we met was, I think, in Damascus, in 2001? 2000? Yeah, 2002, 20 years ago. And I think if there is one person who knows Syria very well and who knows how important this is Marjolein. So I'll give you the mic. And so maybe you can say a little bit about the book before you take the first copy. We didn't prepare this, so I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you can. And please stand here so we can make a good picture.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Uğur. Thank you, Jaber. It's a very big honor to be receiving this book from you. I want to thank you for the hard work you've done. You've worked hard, very hard, but also a hard job. And deep respect for that. I also want to thank you for making this information available to the Dutch audience and hopefully also a wider audience when it's translated, because you've contributed really to the evidence and to the evidence that Syria is not safe, which is, I think it's very important that people realize this. And as you said, indeed, when this kind of systems exist, it's also very important that people know this. So thank you for describing this system of darkness, and I hope it will help that people here realize that when there is such a system of darkness, it will cast a shadow on all of us, also here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, خلينا نعطيها سوا. Yeah. Come. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
This is living in freedom, huh? This is living in freedom, that we can laugh about the presentation of a book called The Syrian Gulag. So thank you all for being here. I think we have, I'm looking at the team here from Spui 25. They also deserve an applause because they always do the hard work. How long will we have for the book selling? Like 20 minutes or something? So until 6:45, and then people will be asked to go and enjoy life. I think that's the best answer, to go and enjoy life, huh? Yes. Thank you.